Hi, and welcome to the Automation as Code demo featuring Continuous Delivery Automation and Continuous Delivery Director. Let's call them CDA and CDD for short. Today I'm going to show you how we can use CDA combined with CDD to trigger a release with the additional help of the Visual Studio Code Editor. What you can see here in CDD is an application which I've already configured and which I'm now starting to run. I'm going to switch to CDA now so that you can see the workflow which is behind it. You can see that the job is running and now it's finished. I'll switch back to CDD so that you can see that the status is reflected here. You can also see the installations of other recent applications. Now I'll switch to the Visual Studio Code Editor and I'll kick off the CDD REST API. First I'm going to retrieve all those CDD releases which you see on the left side. On the right side you can see the results. Now I'm going to search for the release that I want to change. And this is the release I'm looking for. It has the ID 22. I'm going to update the release ID with the number 22. Now I'm going to go down a little bit to retrieve the DSL of a specific release. In CDD, we call the release DSL release as code. This means that it's a complete representation in JSON format of this release in CDD. I'm now going to store this release on my local machine, so I'm going to set up a folder. I create a new folder. This is going to be the folder where I'm going to place all of the release manifests. I'm going to save the JSON response and give it a name. And now I can open the resulting code. It's not formatted yet, so I'm going to do a shortcut to tidy up the JSON. And now I'm going to switch to this folder and I'll use a git init command to create a new empty Git repository to save the actual state. And now I save this new file to my local repository. I commit this change with an initial commit message so that I have this base version in my repository. The next step I'm going to do is to create a new branch. This is a branch where I want to change the release code so that it's like a new version, so to say, and detach the older one so that I can step back. I'll just create this My Releases Code version 2 branch. Now I'm switching to CDA so that we can have a look at the CDA part. Here I can also retrieve all the applications which are stored on the system, and I browse through them to search for the specific application that's linked to the CDD release. I'm going to also store this application here and I'll add the application ID. Now I'm going to do an export of this application, copy the application name and make a duplicate of the application. I now get a new ID for the duplicate application. I enter the new application ID in the REST file over there. And now I can export the new duplicate of the CDA application. This is also a complete export which contains all the work, logs, components, properties and so on. I'm going to store the folder with all the application files in the same folder that I put the release manifests. I give it a name based on the application name. Doing this makes it easier to find, so you can either use the ID or the application name. It's up to you, whatever you prefer. You can now see the representation here of this application, which contains almost everything which is related to it. I also want to add this to my local repository. In this case, I'm using GitHub, so I'll just add this file in Git with a commit. So now I have both files in my repository, and these are the files that I'm going to change and update as needed. I re-import these files to CDA and to CDD. I'll start first with my test application version 2. The goal here is to change this my package war to a new version so that I can use a different war file, especially for the front end component. Normally this application consists of a front end and a back end. The front end in our case would be a Tomcat application and the back end would be a database. Now I'm copying the component part. I create a new file where I just put the front end component only. I'll clean up the JSON so it's a little bit more readable. I just remove the unnecessary section. Then I'll change this WAR file name to _v2. I've already put this WAR file into this folder where I'm going to grab it from. Now I can use this JSON file, this component JSON file with the correct ID, and update it in the CDA database. I'm now searching for the relevant REST call. It's called Update Components of a Single Application Workflow. I'll send the request and I get an export, so I can also check here that the file has changed. Now I'll need to take a pair of these CDD sections, so I open again the release as code JSON format file, and here I just change this name to the application I just created or duplicated with the _v2. In this case, I'm going to directly do a search and replace so that I can replace the application in every place where it's used. Then I increment the version number because I also want to reflect in CDD that there is a new version. There is a specific release identifier. It's always the release name / version, and I also do a search and replace here to just increment the version number. So the application version number is now replaced everywhere, and I now do the same thing that I did in CDA before. I switch back to the CDD REST API and run the import single release using a DSL manifest REST call. Again, I get the response. Now I switch to CDD and do a refresh. You can see that we have all the applications with _version 2, so it's reflected here that we updated the CDD and CDA applications. I can of course execute this release, which means that the new WAR file gets deployed and not the old one. Likewise, I can of course check the workflow. Since I made a duplicate, it looks similar, but the files which get transferred to the Tomcat are different. Here I use a new release, and I'm also going to show the installations. In this video, you learned how CDA and CDD work together to deliver releases and their payload as code. Thanks for watching.